Pittsburgh Steeler fans, it is time once again for another edition of the Curtain Call podcast. My name is Michael Beck, your deputy editor of BehindTheSteelCurtain.com, and my partner in crime, as always, the film guru of BTSC, Mr. Geoffrey Benedict. Geoffrey, how you doing tonight, sir?
Doing good, Michael, doing good.
Yeah, and we do have a special guest that will be joining us shortly to break down some Iowa Hawkeyes prospects. Obviously, the theme of today's show, and moving forward, breaking down some of those college football prospects over the coming weeks here before we hit the NFL draft. But we wanted to start with Iowa, specifically because there's one certain player that I think would kind of be the dream, well, for me, and I think for a lot of Steeler fans, if it were to break down this way. And truly the one player that in mock drafts has kind of gone around where the Steelers pick. And if he managed to be available, I'm pretty sure, I would pick him basically over anyone else that would be available in that position. That, of course, being Tyler Linderbaum. Now, Geoffrey, is that an insane thought before our guest jumps on here? Is if that center's available, could you take anyone else? Can you justify it over him?
Not really. No, I think, there's a few players in this draft I would take over Linderbaum with what the Steelers roster currently looks like, and they are not going to be there at 20. I don't think Linderbaum will be there at 20. I think his stock's going to go up as this process goes on. But we'll see. You'll see. Crazier things have happened.
No, absolutely they have. Like, Pouncey should never have made it to the Steelers. David DeCastro never should have made it to the Steelers. But I'll pose you this question. If the Steelers had the 10th pick in the draft, would things change? Would Linderbaum still be the pick at 10?
Probably. Yeah, probably at that point.
Nothing really changes for me.
Yeah, at that point you're sitting there saying, well, maybe if everyone in the world is stupid, Neal falls to the Steelers or something like that, you'd take him. But it's got to be Linderbaum.
Of course, there are some big tackles that are going to be available in that top 10-ish range.
Yeah.
How many, Neal you'd probably take over Linderbaum. I think that's fair. I don't think anyone would argue that. Say the Steelers had the 5th pick in the draft. Neal's gone. The pass rushers are gone. We're really juicing this up here.
We're finding out how high would you take Tyler Linderbaum?
Just an honest question. The Steelers roster
at 5, if Evan Neal and some pass rushers are gone, you've got quarterbacks sitting there. You might have someone desperate to trade up. You could probably trade back to 10 and then take Linderbaum. It would be my strategy. Just trade back and then take him.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, our special guest is now here. I'm going to pull him up. Mr. Kennington Smith, helping us break down the Iowa Hawkeyes. Kennington, how are you doing tonight, sir?
I'm good. How are y'all? Thank y'all for having me.
Oh, no, our pleasure. We're starting off the show here just talking about one of our favorite prospects, first and foremost, Mr. Tyler Linderbaum, Remington Award winner. Can you break down his game for us and just kind of explain why he is as talented as he is, perhaps, and why he's kind of looked at as the top center in this draft class?
Yeah, Tyler Linderbaum, simply put, is just an elite prospect when you look at what he was able to do on our Iowa offensive line this year, especially one that was very young, a lot of new starters coming into the fold, an offensive line that was injured throughout the year. They lost starting guard Kyler Schott at the beginning of the year to a foot injury, so they were a little depleted, and he was really the one that anchored that offensive line. When you look at his tape, elite pass blocker, elite run blocker, finisher, plays through the whistle, plays with a mean streak. I mean, it seemed like every week, Pro Football Focus and others were putting up highlights of his, just mauling defenders, whether that was, a group of 5 school like Colorado State or Kent State, all the way up to Penn State at the time. That was a top 4 matchup, and he dominated that game as well. So very consistent, everything that you're looking for in an interior offensive lineman. And at a school like Iowa, when you have the offensive line pedigree that they have, for him to be compared to people like Tristan Wirfs, Brandon Sheriff, Marshall Yonda, and others, to be in that kind of tier, closing it out with a consensus All-American Remington Award winner, like you said. I mean, there's just nothing not to like there. And somebody that I think that when we start getting into combine and he's getting in front of these NFL teams, interviewing, and they really get a sense of who he is as a person and knowing him on a personal level, I wouldn't be surprised to see his stock go even higher.
Now, there's a lot. One of the things, the negatives about him is his length and his size. Do you think these could be an issue in the future in the NFL, that he's not quite as big as some of the NFL linemen, or do you think that's something that's overblown and won't be a problem for him?
I don't really see that being as much of a problem for him. I mean, obviously, there's going to be a learning curve going into the NFL, an uptick in competition, uptick in strength, all of those things. But this is somebody who hasn't really given us any red flags in terms of that being something that he's not being able to handle. I mean, they played at the highest level in the Big Ten. You got a chance to see him against an SEC foe, against Kentucky in the bowl game. He was making plays in that one as well. One that I can think of is that screen pass to Sam Laporta down the end of the stretch, and you kind of see him running almost stride for stride with him blocking down the field. So a lot to like about him. I think that is a concern that might ding him a little bit in terms of maybe being, maybe the first offensive lineman taken off the board or something like that, maybe not being in the top 10 for something like that. But I don't foresee that being a major red flag.
Yeah, you mentioned his speed. That's one of the things I want to ask you on as well. It's kind of freaky for a guy at his position, his size, to be able to move like he does. Thinking back of all these terrific offensive linemen that have come out of Iowa over the years, and of course, guys in that conference that have already carved out roles for themselves, is Linderbaum at the top of that list when it comes to athleticism amongst offensive linemen? Because I'm not sure I've seen anything quite like that from a center prospect before.
Yeah, that's definitely a rarity. I think that's something that can maybe separate him from others that he's been mentioned with. Somebody who's very athletic, a multi-sport athlete, wrestled in high school. Actually beat Tristan Wirfs in a wrestling match. They were great friends and great rivals in high school in that respect. And another play that sticks out, it was a 2020 season. They're playing in the snow. Tyler Goodson runs for an 80-yard touchdown, and Linderbaum was almost running stride for stride with him as well. And we got a chance to talk to Tyler about that this year. And Tyler Goodson, he said, I've never seen anything like that. He said he was almost close enough to him to hand the ball off to him and let him score a touchdown. So that's, definitely not something that is commonly seen in offensive linemen. I know that, athletic offensive linemen are starting to become more of the norm, but that type of speed is something that's still incredibly rare.
Now, a lot of people are saying he could be a center or a guard. Do you think that's really a thing with him, that he can play guard, and do you think that he would benefit from a position change, or you think he's really, really that level of a center that he should just be a center?
Yeah, I think that I'm looking at him primarily as a center, especially when you consider the kind of the leadership aspect. I'm sure just physical tools wise, he could play guard just because he's that talented. But I feel like, center is where he's going to thrive the most.
So for the Steelers, there are kind of problems along the offensive line. Obviously, there's a bunch of them, but a lot of youth. And they don't really have anyone that I would say is kind of a vocal leader of that group anymore after a few retirements the last couple of years. Is Tyler Linderbaum someone that can talk, like stand up in front of a group, lead a group of guys, be able to talk, or is he someone that's a little more reserved and have to look for that leadership somewhere else?
Yeah, he's definitely somebody. He's kind of he's not a super raw type of person in terms of us just interacting with him, but I get the sense that he's somebody to where if something needs to be said, then he is going to say it. I think that another part of this year, and I kind of touched on it earlier, was just his leadership aspect with this offensive line group. It's incredibly rare for a school like Iowa to start multiple freshmen on the offensive line. That's what they did this year, and him being in the middle of it all, bringing those guys along, and those guys, showed flashes throughout the year. And towards the end of the year, you saw the offensive line really start to pick up momentum. So I think that that's somewhat of a parallel of him being placed into a situation where there's a lot of youth and guys trying to find their way, not really knowing kind of, the ropes and the ins and outs of Big Ten play and kind of how to maintain that consistency. And I think that he was just a steady example of that, how to stay consistent and, what it takes to truly thrive at that level. So I don't really have too many questions about his leadership ability.
I was blanked on my question. I was going to ask him. I got never. I'm sorry. The Steelers are drafting 20th, right? Mm-hmm. And right now, mock drafts have Tyler Linderbaum going in that range. Do you think by the time teams, like you said, teams interview him, teams get him, he goes to the combine, runs the agility drills, does all that stuff? Do you think there's much of a chance the Steelers could get a Tyler Linderbaum at the 20th pick, or is this a guy we're going to have to trade up for?
You probably have to trade up a few spots, I think. I think that he would probably I'm thinking around top 15, honestly, after, combines and interviews and those things. I know kind of at the beginning of this process, he was rated really high, and then we kind of see his name fall down the boards. But I think, like you said, the agility, actually getting in front of teams, interviewing him is going to kind of re-solidify him in that top 15 spot. So if that's a prospect that the Steelers really want, I imagine they'll probably have to trade up maybe, 3-4 picks. I think that waiting at 20 would be a little bit optimistic, but we'll just kind of see how things shake out after the combine.
Yeah, it's kind of funny to me how this draft process has already taken off. Tyler Linderbaum is kind of seen as a top 5 prospect throughout the season, wins the award as the best center in college football, shows his freaky athleticism once again. Iowa was a top-ranked team for a good stretch of the season as well. And then it just kind of seems like people got hung up on his size a little bit. Does he play to his size? Does he play bigger than that? Is he someone that, like, to me, I kind of see a mauler within him. Is he someone that can do that at this level, or is that something he might struggle with because of his stature?
Yeah, I think that's a pretty accurate assessment. I'm a first-year beat reporter here at Iowa, so I don't have as much experience in terms of watching him maybe grow in terms of size. But when I started watching him play, just kind of eyeballing it without really knowing his official height and weight, I never really got the sense that, this is somebody who's, kind of undersized for their position. Iowa as a school, and Kirk Ferentz has spoken to this a lot, is a school that tends to be just, undersized in general on both sides of the ball, offensive and defensive line. That's just something that they kind of have to play through. So maybe that's something that's maybe normal for Iowa offensive linemen to maybe not be as big as others across other Power 5 institutions, but definitely somebody who, plays with their pads, plays, with their weight, and plays stronger than he is. Like I said, just a kind of a highlight tape. You can find him on Twitter and all types of Twitter threads if you go down the rabbit hole of him just kind of, dominating at all levels.
Now, you just said him dominating. Is there any game, any team, any matchups that you can recall that actually caused him to struggle this past season?
Yeah, I think that there, games where the entire offensive line just kind of failed to establish dominance. I think of Wisconsin is a good example. I think that the Purdue game is another example. It just throughout the season, they kind of had trouble kind of establishing the run game. Like I said, a lot of that had to do with youth on the offensive line and experience on the offensive line. But there were a few times where, I kind of saw the offensive line maybe not play up to the Iowa standard. But if you're just kind of looking at him individually in terms of where he graded out in each of those games, he still posted high remarks. But, those are just a few off the top of my head where I can think of that he struggled in.
Now, Geoffrey, is there any other questions you want to ask about Linderbaum, or should we turn our attention to some other prospects?
I'm good.
All right. So, Kenneth, of course, Tyler Linderbaum is the big name, but there are some other guys coming out as well. First name I want to kind of just pose a question is Jack Campbell, linebacker. What kind of round is he kind of looking at to go in? Is he like an NFL type, or can you just kind of break him down a little bit for us?
Yeah, well, Jack Campbell's actually he's returning to Iowa.
Is he coming back?
I believe that he's returning.
Do you have that, Geoffrey?
To Iowa.
Yeah,
the COVID thing messed me up.
He was a pro prospect. I just want to make sure, but I am 99% sure that
which is great research on my end, eh?
Yeah, he's returning.
He is returning. All right.
Year.
Well, I won't even bother asking about Riley Moss either, because he's also returning. Just all the like top players from Iowa like either enter the portal or return to school. So just one of those things. How about this name? Maybe the most fun name in the draft. I know Jeffrey Benedict loves Zach Van Valkenburg. Can you break down the defense lineman's game?
Yeah, Zach Van Valkenburg is somebody who incredibly high motor is the first thing that I think of. Disruptor, somebody who's a very strong run defender in terms of where he plays on the defensive line. But he showed some pass rush ability this year as well that I think will entice some NFL teams. He does a really good job of kind of converting initial power to kind of speed off of the edge and able to disrupt things in the backfield. good frame. I think that he has an opportunity to maybe add some muscle going into the NFL and play a little bit bigger than he is. But high motor, somebody who I think is more of a day 3 prospect, and somebody who could really be a value pick in the later rounds for a team like the Steelers.
Yeah, do you see him as coming in and being able to, contribute in a rotation or be a backup on the edge right away? Or do you think he's a guy who's going to be, make his name in special teams and then work his way onto the field beyond that later?
Yeah, I think that, initially when you're talking about special teams, I definitely think that he's somebody who could be an immediate impact player there. I think that Iowa as a school, when you talk about their elite play on special teams, that's something that they truly take pride in. So somebody who I think definitely can contribute in that area. He's an older player, so I think that is going to help him as well. And he's kind of been in a situation before, transferring from a Division II school to Iowa, and kind of being that rotation player and learning a little bit, and then was able to kind of step into the forefront when his time was called. So I think that could be a role for him as well. I think that he's somebody that you can trust in limited snaps. So if you got down to a situation where maybe there's, an injury, or even if you do take him in the later rounds and kind of project him as somebody who could be a day 1 contributor, I think that that's in the cards for him. Unfortunately, he didn't get a combine invite to my knowledge, so we'll have to wait for pro day to kind of see where he's at physically and how he runs and all of that. And that, might be able to, help him rise up draft boards, or maybe if teams are a little wary, maybe he can fall down draft boards as well.
Now, one last question for me on Van Valkenburg. Is he someone that can drop into coverage? I know that's something the Steelers kind of ask out of their edge rushers, or is he someone that would have to be kind of just a pure pass rushing specialist?
Yeah, I'm thinking somebody who's just playing hand on the ground. That's not something that defensive ends did at Iowa much this year. So I don't know if that's in his bag. But just based on what I've seen this year, I project him as somebody, playing, mostly hand on the ground and trying to cause disruption in the backfield.
Sticking with the defense, Iowa safety Dane Belton. Where do you think he belongs in the draft? And basically, how good is he? What's he play? What's his game?
Yeah, Dane Belton is somebody who was one of those players at the end of the year that you were looking at somebody who could potentially enter the draft. And I think that he was somebody at the beginning of the year where you're probably looking at him as somebody that you thought could step into that cash position. And I'll elaborate a little bit on that later. But he's somebody who you thought that you might have for multiple years. I don't think that many people expected him to have this pop out year where he, leads the team in 5 interceptions on a team that broke a school record in interceptions. So he was the top of that list there. Great in terms of playing physical and making tackles as well. And we're talking about that cast position, somebody who is kind of a safety, cornerback type hybrid, physical player. Like I said, he can play against the run. Amani Hooker, who plays for the Titans right now, was the first Iowa player to be in this cast position. Dane is the second following in his footsteps, and you've seen, him be an all Big Ten player and produce in that role as well. When I look at him as a prospect, like I said, I thought that he was somebody who could either return or go to the league. I would probably look at him as maybe, like around a 3rd round prospect, maybe in the 2nd round. We'll see where he tests that. He got a combine invitation, so teams will be able to see him. I know that if he would have came back for another year going into 2023, definitely would have been held in very high regard among the top defensive backs in the country. So maybe, that tidbit in itself might help him rise up draft boards. But Dane's one of my favorite prospects in the draft, and I'm really excited to see how he tests out and, what his stock looks like afterwards.
One more quick question for me on Dane. I've seen some kind of reports that people could see him as a linebacker, some as a safety. Is there a spot that he fits better in?
I would keep him as safety. I think there is something to linebacker though, because Iowa, was a 4-3 team that switched to that 4-2-5 cash. So, you had, Barrington Wade, who's in the Broncos organization right now, kind of playing that cash position. They have a linebacker right now on the roster, Justin Jacobs, who's about 6'5", 240, and he plays in that position as well when they go into 4-3. So I do think there's something there to maybe Dame being a linebacker. But if he were a linebacker, I would project him as, maybe like kind of like one of those hybrid linebackers, the 6'2", maybe 220, 230, who can, play in space and are really fast and have that ability to cover, tight ends and also play in the run. So I would see him as maybe that type of linebacker, but I would probably project him as safety right now.
Okay. The other Iowa safety, Jack Corner, is he going to, make a draft? Is he a player that could make some noise in the NFL, or is this kind of a fringe NFL roster guy?
Yeah, I think that we're looking at him as more of a fringe roster type player. I think that he has obviously a kind of like high floor, low ceiling type player, but somebody who's incredibly smart, multi-year starter in the secondary, somebody who communicated very well in Phil Parker's defense in his secondary. And we kind of understand how difficult that is. Somebody who I think would be an elite special teams player in the NFL, given an opportunity. I feel like that's kind of where his lane would be, as maybe, undrafted free agent, gets into a camp, shines on special teams, and then maybe just through attrition of the NFL season or whatever the case may be, he might be able to work his way into a playing rotation at safety, just because, he is smart and dependable. But I do see him as kind of a fringe guy making his way through special teams, and then we just kind of see what happens from there.
Last player I wanted to touch on before we let you on with your day, Kennington, is running back Tyler Goodson. I know he declared for the draft. What kind of player is he like? I've seen the word speed with him quite often. Is he an NFL type running back? And for the Steelers, they're kind of looking for a change of pace type guy. Is that someone that could fit the mold? Is someone that plays third downs and every other series sort of thing?
Yeah, that's a lane that I think that he would thrive in the NFL. You want to talk about speed. One of the first plays of the season for Iowa this year was against Indiana. He takes a sweep for a 50+ yard touchdown, and that was one of the fastest runs of the year by any player in college football this year. So he definitely has the top end speed when he's able to get that opportunity. This is somebody who's an all first team Big Ten running back, followed that up this year, all Big Ten selection, again, 1,000-yard season. He's kind of what the NFL is looking for now. When you think about, multi-running back tandems in the backfield, and you have somebody who is able to kind of run between the tackles and also be able to catch the ball. That's something when I talked to him after he declared for the draft, something that he was really interested in and doing in the NFL is using his hands, getting out of the backfield. We saw that a few times this year. In the Maryland game, he had about a 70-yard touchdown reception out of the backfield. Shook a couple defenders on his way there to the end zone. So he has all of those type of tools you're looking for. If you're looking for a change of pace, somebody like, third down, maybe obvious pass down, situation and those things. I think that's somebody, who could be very effective. Somebody's going to have to get better in terms of pass blocking. I think that's, kind of where he's going to need to improve the most, but I know he's training hard, adding muscle and those type of things. So I'm excited to see him test at the combine as well. I'm really interested to see what his 40 time would be. But if you're looking for somebody to come in and be an immediate impact player, next to a Najee Harris, who we understand is the number one back, but to kind of come in and change the pace and add some different things to the offense, I think that would be a pretty good fit.
Geoffrey, is there anyone else you wanted to touch on, or any questions you wanted to add? Nope, you're all good. Okay. Good. Kennington, before we let you go, is there anything you want to plug for the people?
Oh man. Yeah, definitely. Just, if you're interested in Iowa Hawkeye content or just anything Big Ten related, follow me on Twitter at Skinny Kenny with an underscore at the end. So just engage with me. If you have any more questions about Iowa, tweet at me. And I just appreciate y'all letting me on and giving me this platform. And hopefully the people watching didn't hate me, so we can do this again sometime.
No, absolutely. Anytime we need to break down Iowa Hawkeyes. The second the Steelers draft Tyler Linderbaum, we're sending you a message to get you back on, because I think that's helpful for both of us.
All right.
So thank you for your time. Geoffrey and I are going to continue on. So once again, thank you. And hopefully we can talk to you soon.
All right. Thank you for having me. Have a good night.
See ya. You too. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, that was Kennington Smith helping us break down the Iowa Hawkeyes. Now, Geoffrey, there's also some pretty big news, Steelers related this past week. Just kind of somewhat of a big hire. One Mr. Brian Flores getting added to the coaching staff. How did you feel about that? Because I know when I looked at my phone and saw that pop up, I thought it was a meme account. I thought it was like, I'm blanking on the names, but the people that have the fake handles that it's like Ivan Rappaport. I thought it was fake. It was just like, yeah, sure. Of course they hired Brian Flores. Yeah, there's been no reports of it out of the blue. The Steelers Twitter account says they hired Flores. Sure. Okay. But then it was true. It was actually true. And then my mind kind of exploded. So, Geoffrey, I want to know what your kind of reaction was to that hire, because I did not see that coming.
Well, I was saying, to toot my own horn here, that with Keith Butler leaving and Austin taking over, right, that they needed a guy, someone who could come in and run the front seven, do the blitz packages. What's Brian Flores known for? His blitzes. His coverage scheme is more. It's a man coverage scheme. It's a good man coverage scheme, but it's not. He's not a defensive coverage guy. He is a blitz guy. So he is a perfect fit from that standpoint. Watching his blitzes, watching the aggressiveness, the disguise. There's a lot of concepts, a lot of ideas, like fundamental ideas of how you blitz that he shares in common with Keith Butler. But I love his system. I love it for Stephon Tuitt. I don't think it's a coincidence that Brian Flores gets signed and all of a sudden we're hearing it's more likely, we're starting to hear good things about Stephon Tuitt returning. Flores it's a great system for those guys. The defensive linemen are pretty much just let loose. You have just absolute havoc being caused by his defensive lines, and I love it. I think it'll be fantastic for the Steelers.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. It'd be huge if the Steelers could get Tuitt back, if that changes his mind on things. I think it's the perfect yin to Terrell Austin's yang in the front seven and secondary. I'm very excited about this hire. I'm very excited if they can retain Flores for a couple years. So when he does eventually get that next head coaching gig, the Steelers get a pair of third-round picks. Hopefully that happens. But for as big as a hire this was, one of the first things that popped into my mind, how much the players respected Flores for standing, like laying on his sword with the whole scandal thing that's going on there with Miami and his thoughts on misrepresentation amongst coaches in the NFL. With all that going on, one of the things that popped in my head and the respect amongst players that Flores kind of gained amongst the players of the NFL is, I wonder if guys would be more likely to come play for the Steelers. Especially like the percentages speak for themselves. 70% of the NFL is African-American players. The coaches that are actually make up the NFL certainly does not represent that percentage, but not to get into that side of things. But generally, I think the players want to support a coach and an organization that actually gives talented people positions. And Flores is by far the best coach the Steelers have, probably aside from Mike Tomlin. Huge hire. And I'm floored because of it. But do you think the Steelers are more likely to land big-time free agents because they signed Brian Flores to a deal?
Let me counter with this. Joe Hayden came to the Steelers. He's talked about the difference between a culture between the Browns and the Steelers. There are a lot of players out there. Like we talk about Miami tanking those seasons. We talked about Minkah Fitzpatrick wanted out. Once guys started getting traded, all these guys wanted out. They didn't want to be a part of a team that was tanking. To have it out there that he was supposed to tank and didn't, and the coach and like the ownership was spreading things about him not being, working well with people and all this stuff because potentially it's because he refused to tank. Like, I think that's going to resonate with players. And I think there's an element here where we have some very good Steelers defenders that have a chip on their shoulder from what's been happening with the Steelers last year and the year before. And now you've got a coach with a giant chip on his shoulder, a coach who is an intense person, is a guy who wants to win and has a massive chip on his shoulder. And I think there are players out there that would want to be a part of a defense that is just like, there to show the NFL that they screwed up. Like, we're going to take this season and show just how badly you screwed up letting Brian Flores come to the Steelers as a defensive assistant. So I think there is an appeal there, and I think there's a great appeal on the roster. And I think you're going to see guys get a little more intense, a little more fired up this year than maybe you would have seen otherwise.
Yeah, no, that is a pretty interesting point, and one that will be interesting to follow as well. Like, one of the things for me that just screams that Flores is a great coach. The Dolphins tried to sell the farm to land Tua Tagovailoa first overall. Of course, Joe Burrow went on to his excellence, but for the absolute worst roster in football, a terrible team, they won 5 damn games. That roster was comparable to the 0-16 Browns and Lions teams. They were awful, and they won 5 games. That is on coaching. What a damn good coach to be able to get your team on that level, to game plan, get your talent up to that.
Well, also, and you look at their numbers on defense, they were like the worst defense in 2019, the worst defense in the NFL, still won those games. And then they come back the next year and they're like the 6th best defense in the NFL. Like, give this guy a year. They'll just give him a year or two and see what you end up with. It's incredible. I love his scheme. He's running in Miami having success with what he had success in against 2018 against the Rams, when the Rams offense was one of the best. It was, I think they were at the time 11th highest scoring offense in NFL history, and they held
with Jared Goff the quarterback.
Yeah, and they held him to 3 points in
the
Super Bowl, and it was visible the Rams had no clue what to do. They had no answers. Sean McVay, for as big of a name and as big good as he's supposed to be, had no answers for Brian Flores. They just,
well, it was incredible now, but yeah, exactly.
Yeah. He faced Tampa Bay, not New England. He faced Tom in Tampa, not New England. He had Brian Flores calling the defense there. It's unbelievable to me. I think he's a great fit. It's going to be fantastic.
Now, one of the things that's interesting to me as well is the amount of former players that Flores has had that would obviously have seen what he's been able to do to the team. Like, there's not a list of great free agents in Miami, but Mike Gesicki is an interesting name. He's more of a receiver than he is a tight end, and the Steelers are losing a bunch of receivers this offseason. So that's an interesting one. J.C. Jackson's kind of already got spurned by the New England Patriots. Stephon Gilmore, one of his favorite coaches ever was Flores. Dante Hightower, the Steelers tried to get him in 2017. Boy, how things would have been different if they actually pulled that one off. The Steelers are still in need of a linebacker and Hightower took off when Flores became his linebackers coach.
Yep.
There is a lot of names here. Do you think guys that have played with him might be a little more interested in the Steelers now that Coach Flo is roaming the black and gold sidelines?
I think so. I think there's a good chance we land someone who's played with him before, and I'd love it. I'd love to bring in a Highsmith. I'd love that a Hightower. I'd love that. Yeah, we got a Highsmith. But even if we don't, we've got. I would love to see what he would do with an Alex Highsmith. I can't wait to see what he does with TJ Watt. I love that we, as the Steelers, need a linebacker who's a bit more of a run thumper, a bit more of a blitzer, and then we're bringing in a guy who uses those kind of linebackers better and doesn't drop them into coverage. He's just like, if they're not a good coverage guy, why would you drop it into coverage? Do what they do. Let them go wreak havoc. I would have loved to see like Vince Williams play for Brian Flores. It would have been amazing. Vince Williams would have loved him because it just would have been like, hey Vince, just go bust up their play. Just go beat people. It's fantastic.
If I had to make a prediction, I feel like I really think Dante Hightower. I feel like that just it almost seems too good to be true. I know he's a little bit older, but just the amount of respect he has, I feel like that one's like almost feels like a certain to me at this point already.
It'd be the perfect situation too for the Steelers because you're bringing in a veteran who's had the success, who has been that kind of defensive leader on a great defense.
I'd be perfect beside Devin Bush.
Right there with Devin Bush, who we hope can turn things around and become that player.
Exactly. And Flores is only going to be great for Bush as well. But the second half of my prediction, I feel like they're going to land Hightower, and I think they're going to get a corner too, like either Gilmore or Jackson. Like I really do. Like to that level, like I think the Steelers will sign a big name free agent. Like I wouldn't classify Hightower as the big name of this offseason by any means. Now he's getting older, but he would provide more than what Colbert gave to the Steelers, if we're being honest. So we'll see how that all boils down. But yeah, no, I think this is a huge move that's going to send some shockwaves across the Steelers organization. And speaking of that, Kevin Colbert spoke to the media this week and sent some shockwaves throughout Steelers Nation when he said when the only quarterback on roster would be the starting quarterback if the season started today. Oh, obviously.
Yeah.
And people's minds were blown. Like, of course Mason Rudolph would be the starter if the season started today. No one else has a contract. Like, of course he would be the starter. What else is he going to say, people? So just relax. He did say they're going to add a quarterback and probably not just one. So we can all just...
He said he expected 4, right? Is it
having 4 at training camp. And, like, you pick up Haskins' RFA deal. And, like, 4 to me is a vet and a rookie at some point. Like, to me, I would prefer if it was a rookie, like, in the later half of the draft, just not necessarily a camp arm, but someone that can push Haskins, a veteran along, like a cheap veteran that can compete with Rudolph. I don't want to spend $20 million on 4 quarterbacks, and like your starter's worth 5 and your backup's worth 5 and his backup's worth 5 and the rookie's worth 2. Like, I don't want that. That'd just be wasting funds. But things are going to be different. And like, to me, I'm sure you agree with this. I think that was blown out of proportion. Would you agree, Geoffrey?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely agree. It's not the end of the world. The sky is not falling, people. It's going to be okay.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. Like, there wasn't too many crazy takeaways from me in Colbert's presser. Of course, him kind of the revelation of like him being known that he was leaving or taking a step back a year ago. I think that was obvious to everyone. We all kind of knew it, but he's not leaving the organization unless the next GM says, hey, you're kind of stepping on my toes a little bit here. So I don't really see that being an issue at all. Like, the other notes was that he doesn't foresee them being big players, but that's typically because the Steelers haven't had money. They have money this year and can create a butt-ton load of money. If I'm going to watch my profanities, they could create a ton of cap space. So they can be players this year. And I think they still add a decent name player. Like I mentioned, like a JC Jackson. I feel like they land someone of that capability to help this team because they have the ability to do so. So were there some bombs dropped? No, not really. He talked about Kendrick Green a little bit. Didn't necessarily say he was trash, but didn't necessarily say he was great either. And didn't even rule out the possibilities of moving him to guard. So I think that's one that rings out in my mind as well. I'm curious if there's any big thoughts from Colbert's kind of presser there that sticks out with you, other than the quarterbacks.
The one that stood out to me is where he was talking about he knew, like, he kind of knew the writing was on the wall that he was going to take a step back. And when you remember last year, there were the rumors that Kevin Colbert was the guy in the Steelers who wanted Ben Roethlisberger kind of to go a year earlier. And I was like, okay, if he knew that was his last year, right? That would make sense. Like, let's get this position solved. Let's get some clarity here. Let's have a season where it's Mason Rudolph and Dwayne Haskins fighting it out. Let's find out what we got, and we'll go into the next season, and we can set up the next guy, with a quarterback, with actual, some closure here, instead of, this season where they're going into a draft, Kevin Colbert's last draft, he's stepping back, and are we going to take a quarterback? All that drama could have been avoided. It just didn't work out calendar-wise.
No, absolutely. Now, the last thing I want to ask you about tonight here, Geoffrey, the Athletic in San Francisco, the San Francisco chapter of the Athletic, I should say, proposed a mock trade today that kind of sent Steelers Twitter a buzz a little bit, even trending when you search the names. Jimmy Garoppolo to the Steelers. Of course, there's been rumors that Garoppolo could be moved by the end of the month. Adam Schefter seemed to shut that down a little bit. But I think inevitably Garoppolo will be moved. One of the things that was kind of pressing to me in the article, he mentioned that doesn't expect there to be a bidding war for Jimmy G. So it'll be fairly easy for a team to get him when they want a player like him. Essentially what it boiled down to was a 4th-round pick this year and a 4th-round pick next year, which had conditions. But if they're trading for Jimmy Garoppolo, paying him $20 million, a little bit more than that, if they're going to make that move, they're going to reach the conditions for that second 4th-round pick. But 2 4th-round picks in not exactly in consecutive years, not 2 picks this year, 1 pick here, 1 pick next year. What are your thoughts on that? Is that too much, or is that the sweet spot for Jimmy G? Could the Steelers add void years on his deal to make him not worth a whole lot of cash? Like what would you think if the Steelers swung a deal like that, and does that deal make any sense whatsoever?
For the 2 4th-round picks, that's about right. Because you are paying him what he's worth. But in my opinion, you're paying him what he's worth in that system. And the question is, what would he be worth somewhere else? I don't like the amount of money he gets. I don't like taking that much because, like we're saying, the Steelers have money. They have ways to free up more money, but everybody has money. Contracts are going to go up this year because there are a lot of teams that cut down to get to the COVID cap. And now, now it's back up again. There's a lot of teams with money. People hitting free agency right now are going to reset some of the mid-level market for free agents. I don't want to take a bunch of that money and put it into a quarterback. I think we're do better just draft a quarterback. Honestly, right now with what free agency should be looking like and what quarterback salaries are like right now, which they're kind of crazy.
They're stupid.
I don't want a mid-level quarterback.
I know. I wholeheartly agree. Like my big thing here, and like what I've kind of discovered, if I'm going to be a GM in the NFL, if you're not like I've been saying top 8 quarterback, and like I still genuinely believe that if you're not a top 8 quarterback or have potential to be that level, hit free agency. I don't care. Someone else can pay $40 million and waste all that time with you because the 10th best quarterback in football isn't winning a championship. That's just not the game anymore. You can't have someone that's not in that top tier. It's just not possible.
Yeah, because they're getting paid too much.
Too much money.
If you were getting that for even $15 million in the current salary cap area, you'd be okay. You'd be like, all right, we can build the rest of the team, and this guy can be good enough to not screw it up for us. But if you're paying that guy $30 million, then that's too much. He's not going to be able to cover for the lack of talent elsewhere.
Oh, exactly. That's why teams win. Like Mahomes' Super Bowl and his second appearance and his NFC title game. And I guess this year, technically, we're all on his rookie deal. That contract tolls now. That $500 million contract starts hitting home hard now. And that's going to affect the Chiefs for years to come. And they're probably not going to be a legit Super Bowl contender. They'll be in the mix, but they probably won't be hoisting a Lombardi for probably like 2-3 years down the road, depending on how the salary cap grows. And if there were to be a hit to that, that could sewer the Chiefs if the cap were to get stagnant again for whatever reason. So that's one of the big things that I want to mention here. It's like, I'm way better off with Mason Rudolph at $4 million and having a vastly improved team around him. That's like 2 top free agents and change with that extra cash than like a Teddy Bridgewater and $17 million a year. Because that's kind of like the range I've heard that is talking about him. That just doesn't make any sense. You can get J.C. Jackson for that. Like, would you rather want a quarterback that's probably like the 25th best quarterback in football at almost $20 million a year, or one of the top 10 corners in the game? That's one of the next premium position. Like, to me, the premium position in football is quarterback, guys that protect the quarterback, guys that get the other team's quarterback, and then trailing behind that is lockdown corners that can take receivers out of the game. So for me, that's where you pay. Don't waste your money on a quarterback. It's okay for a year of Mason Rudolph. Like, it is okay.
Yeah.
If they can actually build a team better around and then hit on a quarterback in 2023. That's perfect. You build a great team. You trade up. You get aggressive for a quarterback next year. You get the right guy in place, and then you're a contender again. You trend up with the right roster this year. You're Tommy Maddox year, and then you hit the quarterback, and you're winning championships for the next 5 years. That's just the way the NFL works right now with these contracts. But we've already taken up too much time this evening. So, Mr. Geoffrey Benedict, is there any final thoughts and some things you want to plug for the people?
Dave Schofield and I have a Vertex coming out on Joe Hayden, looking at his season and what he still had this year and where that could work for the Steelers next year if they decide to bring him back. So look for that one. And there were a couple of film rooms. Mine came out today, and Kevin Smith had one yesterday on Brian Flores' defense. If you want to get super pumped about the potential of the Steelers defense with Brian Flores in the fold.
Hey, no, that's great stuff. Make sure you're checking out everything really from behindthesteelcurtain.com. Some great articles, even though it's the offseason, some great stuff dropping in the pipeline. And the Steelers are keeping us extremely busy. And Dave Schofield even says 11 a.m. Tomorrow, that being Thursday for the podcast crew for that Vertex article. Thanks again for tuning in, Dave. As always, our editor at behindthesteelcurtain.com. But yeah, once again, click over to the website, behindthesteelcurtain.com. You already know it. But on top of that as well, I want to remind everyone of the podcast platform. If you're just watching on YouTube and Facebook, you're still only getting about a third of the story. So by just go to wherever you get your podcast traditionally, be it Spotify, iTunes, Pandora, you name it, search Behind the Steel Curtain. Heck, just search Steelers and you probably won't have to scroll long to find Behind the Steel Curtain. If we're not number one, we're certainly close to the top wherever you get your podcasts from. So for my co-host, Geoffrey Benedict, my name is Michael Beck. You've been listening to Curtain Call, and we'll catch you guys.